Hello, everybody, and welcome to a brand new podcast brought to you by Thunder and Lightning Gaming called Phil Spencer is My Uncle. And just want to address this right away. I'm sure you're all wondering, what does the title mean? And I regret to inform you that I am not going to be explaining what the title means. I will only explain the title to one person, and that person is Phil Spencer, because the core conceit of this podcast, titled Phil Spencer is My Uncle, the thesis statement, if you will, is that someday, one day, on this podcast, I will interview Phil Spencer. The episode where I interview Phil Spencer will not only be the episode where I reveal what the title means, if he asks, but it will also be the last episode of this podcast. And what this podcast is going to be me discussing the history of Microsoft making video games, starting with the release of the original Xbox, and, I'm going to go on probably a month-by-month basis. I'm going to look at game releases that released around that time. I'm going to do a little discussion about all the important ones. But before I get into that, before I get into what I'm actually going to be doing on this podcast, some of you might not even know who Phil Spencer is, and if you don't, that is totally, perfectly okay. Phil Spencer is the CEO of Microsoft Gaming. So that's Microsoft's games division, the video games specifically. They make Xbox, and they also just, make video games. So if I can just briefly go over his entire career. Yes, so Phil Spencer joined Microsoft in 1988. He was working as an intern, and he had a number of technical roles. And then he essentially was one of the driving forces behind Microsoft getting into video games. With the launch of the Xbox in 2001, Spencer joined the Xbox team and served as general manager of Microsoft Game Studios. He worked personally with studios such as Lionhead and Rare up until 2010, when he made his first live E3 appearance as, studio head Phil Spencer as we know him today. In March of 2014, Spencer was to, quote-unquote, lead the Xbox Live Groove Music and Movies and TV team and Microsoft Studios as part of the Windows and Devices division. Then, in September 2017, Spencer was promoted to the Senior Leadership Team, which gave him the title of Executive Vice President of Gaming, and he directly reported to the CEO. And then that brings us to January 2022, when Microsoft, for, I believe it was 2.2, I don't remember the exact number, forgive me, but Microsoft just bought Activision Blizzard for a large sum of money. And along with that, Phil Spencer was promoted to the role of CEO of Microsoft Gaming. So as of January 2022, he is the top of the totem pole. He is in charge of everything video games as far as Microsoft is concerned. Whether or not they make them, whether or not they're Xbox exclusive, or if they get to be on PlayStation or Steam or not, whether or not Banjo-Kazooie gets to be in Smash Brothers, everything has to go through him at least once. And I feel like I should talk a bit about why I chose Phil Spencer as the focal point of my podcast, and it's very simple. I sort of looked at a bunch of different CEOs briefly, and I sort of did a cross-examination between which ones I would like to interview and which ones I think would be down for an interview in a podcast with such a weird title. So, yes. So, just to recap, Phil Spencer is my uncle. He's not really my uncle. I should say that much. Phil Spencer is not actually my uncle. I probably should have said that first. That is just the funny, quirky name of this podcast. If you want to know what that means, you're going to have to wait until I interview Phil Spencer on this podcast. And when I do, that'll be the last episode. But until then, let's talk about the Xbox. The Xbox launched in the United States on November 15th, 2001. There was a number of launch titles. I'm going to mention all of them briefly, and then I'm going to talk about a few of them. So, in alphabetical order, except I will be skipping a few. In alphabetical order, we have 4x4 Evo 2, Air Force Delta Storm, Arctic Thunder, which was a home console re-release of a arcade game, one of the ones where you're like riding on a jet ski or whatever. I actually have Arctic Thunder for PlayStation 2. We have Cell Damage, which was this very unique, very cool, like vehicle destruction game where you're kind of put into like a circular arena, and it's not really a race, but it's more like how getting kills on other cars and picking up power-ups, and all the power-ups were silly, and game didn't take itself too seriously, and the reason it's called Cell Damage because the entire game was cel-shaded. We have Dark Summit. We have Dead or Alive 3, the third installment in the Dead or Alive series of fighting games. Fusion Frenzy, Mad Dash Racing, and then we have a bunch of sports games. We have Madden NFL 2002, NASCAR Heat 2002, NASCAR Thunder 2002, NFL Fever 2002, and NHL Hits 20-02. Not sure how you're supposed to read that. We have Oddworld Munch's Odyssey, I believe the third in the Oddworld series. We have Project Gotham Racing. We have a game just called Shrek. We have Test Drive Off-Road Wide Open. We have Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 2X, which I'm pretty sure was the Xbox re-release of Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2. We have something called Trans World Surf. And then we have none other than Halo Combat Evolved, which is going to be the focal point of the rest of the podcast episode. And I'm sure you can see this on the, the episode length. But these episodes aren't going to be too long. I'm not going to talk about much. I just sort of want to do like a 20 to 30 minute, like, get in there, talk about a few things, get out. And also, this podcast, I don't think is going to really have a schedule. I think it's just going to upload whenever I want. So I wanted to spend episode 1 primarily talking about Phil Spencer and just talking about how awesome he is. And I thought, what better way to start than with the launch of the Xbox and the launch of Halo Combat Evolved, a game that, by any metric, changed the scope of not only shooters, not only first-person shooters, but changed the scope of video games forever. And I actually didn't know that it launched on Xbox, because when I was a kid, I didn't have an Xbox. I had a PlayStation 2 and a GameCube. The Xbox sort of came out of nowhere from where I was sitting. So I didn't get one. I had a 360. I love my 360. I essentially played my 360 through the entirety of the, I believe that was the 7th generation of video gaming. I had a Wii, but everyone had a Wii. But I did not have an original Xbox. So I knew that Halo came out on the original Xbox, but I thought it launched on PC first. For some reason, it did not. It came out on Xbox on November 15th, the day that the Xbox launched, and then it came out on Windows 2 full years later on September 30th, 2003. So I don't know why I thought that. But yes, Halo Combat Evolved is the first in the Halo series. The Halo series that has, of course, spawned numerous games. We just saw the release of Halo Infinite, which is, I believe, if you're still counting them by numbers, the 6th Halo game. There's been a bunch of Halo spin-offs. There's a currently running on Paramount Plus Halo TV show. This series is huge. This series is a touchstone of video games at this point. And it all started with the launch of the Xbox on November 15th, 2001. I can only assume that Halo Combat Evolved is what most people were playing that day, because a console lives and dies by its, at least in its first couple months, it lives and dies by its launch titles. And you have a few. I'm sure people weren't rushing to the store to get Arctic Thunder the way I was. But you have Fusion Frenzy, which is sort of like a Mario Party clone with original Xbox characters. You have this Shrek game that I'm sure sold fine, but I'm also sure came out on GameCube and PS2 and everything like that. And then right there in the middle, you have Halo. I feel like this launch would have been pretty weak compared to other video game console launches, compared to other historic video game launches, except for the fact that you have Halo Combat Evolved, one of the most important video games ever, but specifically for first-person shooters, because up until this point, first-person shooters weren't, like, they were around, right? But in 2001, they were just sort of starting to see the push towards multiplayer, which, like, if you look at a first-person shooter, if you look at the legacy of first-person shooters, if you look at how a first-person shooter plays, how it feels to play, it was always going to go there. There's no doubt in my mind that it was never going to, like, turn to a strictly multiplayer scene, which is what it is right now, and which is what it's been for the majority of the last 15 years, right? I bought Halo Infinite. I played Halo Infinite. I think it's really good. I played the single-player mode. I know I'm one of those weirdos. I don't really love to play online. I feel like most people do play online. I was talking to one of my coworkers the other day, and she was excited to go home and play more Halo Infinite, and I wanted to talk to her about the story, and she said, I didn't even play it. I've been playing the multiplayer. And that is not a uncommon thing to hear. A lot of people play these games just for the multiplayer. But Halo, first of all, Halo's one of the only ones that I've played, and I've played many Halo games. Like I said, I don't love multiplayer. I have played multiplayer, but it's not usually where I go towards. But I think I haven't played 5. I haven't played Halo Guardians, if that's the 5th one. And I haven't played Halo 2. Other than that, I've pretty much played them all. I haven't played Halo Wars 2, as far as the spin-offs goes. But I've played a lot of them, and a lot of them are really good. There was a time in my life where I was probably playing more Halo than any other video game series. I feel like for me personally, the when I got really into Halo was with Halo Reach, and I know I'm talking more. I'm talking about more than just the first Halo game. But you know, I will. These other Halo games will have their time to shine. If I had anything specific to say about this first Halo game, I feel like the story really caught me off guard with how good it was, because I played Halo 1 when it was when it was re-released on the Master Chief Collection or whatever it's called. I had already played 3 and 4 and Reach and ODST and all these games, and I went back to 1. And I found the story really engaging. I didn't expect that, because I hate that I do this, but I do this. I typically write off older games as being good until I've experienced them. And this was one of those games where I was like, wow, I really didn't expect it to be this good. I didn't expect to like it this much. And I really did. I found the story surprisingly engaging for what it was. It's also worth noting, so much so that it's right there in the Wikipedia header, that Halo was the game that spawned the web series Red vs. Blue. If you've been on the internet for anything longer than 20 minutes over the past 20 years, you've probably heard of Red vs. Blue. It is the proper word is a machinima. That is the term that is used when you use someone else's 3D animation and put your own words over it. You use someone else's 3D models to create an animated movie. It's a weird way of saying that they played the Halo game and then they put funny voices over it, and it spawned this huge giant multimedia conglomerate that put the company Rooster Teeth on the map. And Red vs. Blue is still going today and will never die, and it's still great and has always been great and always will be great. And that would not have happened if it wasn't for Halo, which is, I guess, the point I was trying to make. So yes, that is Halo Combat Evolved. Just one of the, I keep saying it, I'm repeating myself at this point, but just one of the most important video games to ever release. And it immediately put Xbox on the map, because Nintendo's been around since, in the video game industry, Nintendo's been around since the early 70s, late 80s, right? And then around the 90s, Sony, established company, comes in and it's like, well, hold on, what if we made a video game? And there was similar feelings of really? Sony is going to make a video game system? I'll see it when I believe it. But not as much as Xbox. I feel like Xbox really came out of nowhere, especially because it was the first, I think ever, but the first really big American-made video game console. Sony and Nintendo are both Japanese companies. Sega is a Japanese company. Atari, I'm not quite sure about Atari, but Atari was already out of the picture when Xbox showed up. They had been done making consoles for a while. So had Sega. So really, the market was Sony and Nintendo for a few years there. And then during the GameCube, PlayStation 2 era, here comes Xbox. And they say, hey, we have a console too. Do you want to check it out? And me as a little kid, I was like, no, I'm good. I'm good over here with my GameCube, which has a ton of cool games on it, and my PlayStation 2, which to this day I believe still has the largest catalog of video games on any console ever. So I was like, I think I'm good. Plus, I was a kid, so I would have had to ask someone for it. There wasn't any me going to the store and buying it myself when Xbox came out. What is that? It's 2001, so I was 8. Yeah, I was 8 when the Xbox launched. I think maybe I was 9 because it launched in November and my birthday's in October. Maybe. I don't know. Doesn't matter. But yes, I was young. I was single digits for sure. I'm not in the market for a third game console. But I'm glad it happened. I'm glad that it exists. I am now, if we can skip ahead to today, the day I'm recording this, I am fully an Xbox gamer. And Chris and I have talked about taking sides before, who's winning, who's not winning. And I think in my as I get older, I'm starting to lean more towards it's not a competition. They're all great. The Switch is a fucking masterpiece. The PlayStation 5 is good. The Xbox has Game Pass, and that's crazy good. The PlayStation 5 runs super well when it doesn't completely crash like it did the other day. If you're watching our stream, I think you'll probably see about that in our Guardians of the Galaxy playthrough. But I am legitimately a fan of Xbox at this point. Because as I said, I played a lot of Xbox 360, but as soon as it was time to pick the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4, and at this point I was buying consoles on my own, so I really had the option of just one or the other. I was never not going to do PlayStation because it had, from what I could tell, a better system and better games. And I was right. It did have a better system and better games, but it's not a competition anymore the way it was. It just isn't. They're both great. They can both do 4K. They can both do 2160p. There's no competition. They're both great. And that's the reason I have both of them, because I felt like I was missing out not having both of them. So I am, and that's why I think that this is the perfect time for me personally to do this podcast, because not only do we have the recent news of Microsoft acquiring Activision Blizzard and King. I still can't get over that. They bought King Games, the people who make Candy Crush. But we also have Phil Spencer's promotion to CEO of Microsoft Gaming. But we also have me being a legitimate Xbox fan. So it'll be interesting to go through the history, at least for the first, couple episodes, first portion of this podcast. It'll be interesting me doing research and going over a console that I quite literally never played. Any Xbox original games I've played are only because they have been released on Game Pass. Like a couple of weeks ago, I downloaded and started playing Blink's the Time Sweeper, I think the game is called. It's fun. It's weird. It's. I'll talk about it on its own episode. But yeah, that'll do it for me. Like I said, sort of a short one. These are going to be on the shorter side. This is probably longer than a typical one, because I wanted to explain the podcast. I wanted to explain everything there is to know about Phil Spencer. I'll do a very, very, very shortened version of the intro I gave in this one at the beginning of every episode. Thank you so much for watching. The next episode will be out. I don't know when. The next episode will be out whenever. If you like this, please let me know. And you also probably noticed that I don't have a guest. I might have a guest here and there. Depends on what game I'm talking about. Depends on how I'm feeling, who I'm with, how the schedule's doing, how everyone else's schedule's doing. But yeah, typically no guest on this one. Just sort of wanna take this one on my own, do a little rundown of everything Xbox and everything Phil Spencer. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. And stick around on this channel. We have a lot more stuff. We have other podcasts. We have Let's Plays. We have video essays that we put our most of our time into. And we have a Patreon that is being updated semi-regularly. We're trying. I apologize. It's been a weird month. But thank you so much for listening. And remember, I don't have an outro for this. Remember to always play Xbox, but also other things, because those are good too. Okay, bye. Thank you for watching. Please be sure to like and subscribe.
Our channel has daily uploads from podcast video essays, Let's Plays to skits.
Be sure to watch on Twitch. We stream all our video game and podcast content live at 5 EST every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday.
Our intro is by Brad Kendrick and music by Froggy and the Friendship. Link to all that in the description below.
Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.